Let's blow this up.
Look alive, Bomb Squad. We are back for another installment of Let's Blow This Up. I am your host, Jason Sircone, and it is damn good to be back on the microphone with you once again. We missed last week's episode, and I hope you missed me as much as I missed you. Tonight, we are going down the path of podcast awards. Let's Blow This Up has not reached that pinnacle yet, but hopefully with the guidance of our guest tonight, we're going to learn how my show and yours can make it to that critical spot in the podcast universe. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the stage tonight the quintessential expert slash, I'm not even going to use that word. I just want to say this man knows what he is talking about when it comes to podcast awards. He is none other than Mr. Dominic Lawson. Dominic, what's happening, my friend?
Peace, man. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Jason. I really appreciate it, man.
Well, I'm glad you could take the time because as I learned when we connected in Charlotte, you have got the keys to the kingdom when it comes to telling us how to do podcast award submission correctly. So tonight we want to dive into that. And I think it behooves everyone listening that might be thinking about this to understand what's the right way to do this and what are some of the mistakes that even some of the big guys make. We want to make sure we're avoiding all of that as we go down this road. But the thing I want to ask first, and this is slightly off subject, but slightly not.
Okay.
That little intro that I just ran to kick off the show. It's gotten a lot of praise, and nothing I've ever asked for. Just guests and people that have seen it have said a lot of good things. And I made the joke once that maybe I should submit that for an award. Is that an award that exists? A podcast or live stream intro?
So yes, there are certain podcast categories depending on where you apply. Where they award on like trailers and stuff like that. So that is an avenue for you. Since you do video, I think the Telly Awards, I think is what they're called, which are geared towards video and stuff like that, may be an avenue you may want to explore.
Okay, because I said that tongue in cheek, not knowing if that was even a tree worth trying to climb. Because if it doesn't exist, I had a couple guests say, create the category, then put it out there and say this needs to be recognized as something really cool.
Well, that's the beauty of a lot of these awards, situations where you can submit, for like, hey, we need a category for this or category for that as well. Also, Jason, there's also local entities as well, like, because they have a video aspect to it as well. So that's something that you can definitely explore also.
Plenty of options. And I'll tell you, like I told some people when we were in Charlotte, it was before your presentation, before coming to see how this worked. I said to my friend Karen Freeland, I'm excited for this presentation because I feel like my show is still rather new, being that we've had one full season. Now we're in season 2. That will be wrapping up in early November, probably around the 30 episode range when that season ends. I always felt this isn't enough to submit my podcast for consideration because we know we were talking about this before we turned the cameras on tonight. A lot of podcasts don't get beyond a few episodes. Right. So I always wonder, is that number a big enough sample size for someone that would be looking at awards or considering handing out an award? Is that a big enough sample size to say this podcast has staying power and they need to be here or they're going to be here for the long run? It made me wonder if I was in that spot. And as I learned from your presentation, I might have been looking at it a little bit wrong. So tell me and tell everyone exactly what you're looking at in that criteria and tell me why I was way off base with my assumptions.
Well, there's two different types of criteria to consider here, right? The first one is depending on what you're applying for, whether it be Ambies or Webbies or Black Podcast Awards or whatever the case may be, they have submission guidelines, if you will, right? So some say, hey, you need to have submitted 6 episodes within this year time frame, or somebody say you need to submit 3 episodes within that time frame. So when you talk about 30 episodes, that's more than enough of a sample size to kind of think about going in that direction. But also, Jason, it's one of those things where you usually submit some type of audio sample. So the judge is not going to listen to like 30 episodes anyway, right? We just want to hear your top like 8 minutes or top 7 minutes or top 5 minutes, whatever they're asking for, right? So whatever audio that Jason has, and it's like a great 5 minutes, we want to hear that. We want to hear why it's the best audio that's there, because not only do I win, I also get invited to judge as well. So I've been on kind of both sides of the coin here. We just want to hear your best stuff, right? And honestly, a judge is not going to go, unless they just want to, like maybe there's a tiebreaker situation or whatever, then maybe I'll go and listen to other episodes or a whole episode or something like that. But I just want to hear your best stuff, right? Because the thing is, it's like, you can create a podcast and it can be phenomenal and this, that, and the other, but it's a whole different tier to say it's an award-winning show. Like, what are you doing different that's not already out there, right? Like, what stories are you telling? How are you presenting those stories, right? So it's kind of twofold when it comes to that. But nah, man, you might be selling yourself short here a little bit, man. Like, 30 episodes is definitely more than enough. As long as it's in that time period, you're good. And that's another thing. It's just important to read those rules and guidelines and stuff like that when it comes to those sort of things.
And again, that's what I learned. I feel like I was very ignorant coming into that because I just made that assumption that I need more time in this show. Not to say that I don't have experience in the space itself, but I was just looking, if I wanted to submit Let's Blow This Up, I felt like I needed more criteria and more to meet what you would want. And then I learned, nope, they want my best stuff. And we've got some great conversations that have unfolded here on this show. Why would I not put that out there for submission?
Absolutely. And another thing in having these conversations, Jason, is that people don't really realize, it's like judges aren't looking at downloads, views, subscriptions. They're like, all that stuff doesn't matter. Like, I just want to hear your best work. So I think that's another thing, since we're talking about myth busting here a little bit, I think that's another thing that's probably important to put out there. Like, a judge is not going to go, oh, they only got 2 downloads. Scratch that.
Yeah.
Like, nah, so not looking at that either.
Yet another reason why we should ignore that metric. It just does nasty, awful things to our mindset.
It definitely can. It definitely can.
Dominic, walk us down this path and how this all began for you. And this could be from the very first time you turned on a microphone and started podcasting, and ultimately when you realized the award criteria or the award aspect of this entire medium that we've all grabbed hold of. How did you realize how that could impact your growth? And what made you go down that path of wanting to first acquire awards, but then help others acquire those awards as well?
So the thing is, Jason, a lot of people don't know this, is that like I actually was on the traditional route. I've been in this game. It'll be 8 years this November. And I was going the traditional, growing the show, downloads, this, that, and the other. And I did all that, right? But I knew that I wanted to, and we kind of talked about this a little bit off camera here. I wanted to kind of expand my range as a podcaster, right? So to go from that interview style like we're doing here and to do like more narrative styles of show and this, that, and the other. And so one of the things I've noticed in just media in general, right, particularly with movies, like, how you see, like you're watching the Oscars and you see a movie wins Best Picture. And you're like, I've never heard of that movie before.
Every year. Every year.
Like, I've literally never heard of that movie before, right? So that's the content now, Jason, that I do. Like I'm the guy that doesn't have the commercial success, but I have the critical acclaim, right? And I just felt like, it was a bet on myself that, like, I feel like that can happen in podcasting as well, where you can have some success. It just looks different than what we normally talk about, like growth, downloads, subscriptions, views, and this, that, and the other. And so I wanted to make that bet on myself. And so I started with a nonfiction narrative show, Black is America, where I highlight little known African-American figures and stories. And honestly, Jason, that show was only meant to just be a portfolio builder. We was kind of talking about that as well. It was just a portfolio builder, maybe submitted for awards. And it was really just to say that, like, I can create this type of work so that way I can monetize and do other types of work for like a network and this, that, and the other. But Black is America just really, it blew up to kind of be on brand with your company's logo and stuff like that. It just kind of blew up, right? And so, and winning all these awards and submitting for them, this, that, and the other, and people love the work and this, that, and the other. And so from there, I just started to, monetize in different ways, right? Like, yeah, I don't monetize through growth of like downloads and this that, and the other, but I'll get a phone call from the United Way and say, hey, we want to do a limited part series about the opiate addiction down in South Florida, right? Like, can you
Mm-hmm.
write that script? Like, we don't want you to record it. We don't want you to edit it. All we want you to do is just write the script for us, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
sure, no problem. Send them proposal. They accept a proposal, and I write the script. They send me a check, and then bada boom, bada bing. There you go, right? And so it just goes to show that like there's there's different ways to success in this game, and I just wanted to prove
100%.
that. I just wanted to prove that, and so I wanted to show that the critical acclaim route, not necessarily maybe the commercial success, was a way to do that, and so we've been able to do that in a myriad of ways. People reach out and just say, "Hey, I want you to sound design this project for me," or right now, so I'm in the Memphis area, so a prominent preacher, in their congregation reached out to me, say, "Hey, our pastor, she's celebrating 30 years of being leading the congregation and stuff like that. We're thinking about doing a limited series, and
Mm-hmm.
we love the work that you're doing. Would you be willing to think about it, submit a proposal?" Like, sure, absolutely. So
Yeah.
I say all that to say that like I thought there was a different way to have that success in podcasting outside of what we normally hear, and so I just wanted to kind of go with it and ran with it, and so far so good.
It's a refreshing thing to hear because we oftentimes equate success in podcasting to how many downloads we get. And
Correct.
that's a narrative that I've been trying to destroy for years because I feel like it throws people off their game so much. They walk away from their project well before they ever experience a breakthrough. And for all they know, they could have been onto something monumental,
Right.
absolutely world shifting. But
That's
because the downloads didn't flood in on day 2 or day 3, they
correct.
bailed. And it's sad because there's a lot of podcasts that you see out there that it looks like they got off to a great start. The episodes that are there were phenomenal, and then they just disappeared. And I have to think that there are a number of factors in play, but I think that download metric is typically the biggest one that throws people off. And they don't think about all these other alternative success stories that you can get. And a lot of it is not put in the public eye. The story
Right.
you just explained, I just had a conversation yesterday and I was talking with a gentleman about reviews and downloads. And I said, I get people that have contacted me because they've listened to my podcast to ask follow-up questions or even to work with me. That's way more important to me than
Right.
any download could ever mean, or any metric, I should say, because obviously if they heard that message, they downloaded. But the point is, think about all of the successes that you can get and don't try to limit it to just that one, because you're going to be on a
Right.
very narrow path and the success won't be experienced for a long time.
Right. And the thing is, in full transparency, Jason, like there have been times where the downloads where somebody wants it to be, and that just meant that they just want the right person for me, right? And that's totally
Mm-hmm.
fine, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, like, there's other metrics to consider. Like, there's the completion rate,
That's
right?
the big one.
Like how long are we listening to this episode, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's a big one as well. And one of the things that I always tell people is like, listen, I would rather have just a few episodes where there's not a lot of downloads so I can work out kinks and this, that, and the other.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time that like I get to like 50,000 subscribers, 100,000 subscribers, I've already worked those kinks out, right? But I
Right.
don't think you get those. I don't think you get those reps by quitting after episode 3, 4, this, that, and the other. So, but also like we've been saying, like there's alternative ways to have success in this game, and I and other people, including yourself, have been proven that that is true.
Yeah, and it's important to think about every factor because even if it's not an award or anything that's tangible,
Correct.
you walk away with skill sets and lessons that are learned. And even if it's just as simple as I get to have a great conversation with my friend Dominic tonight, for me,
Right.
that's fulfilling. And anytime I'm doing these live streams, that's typically what I think about during the day is leading when I'm leading up to this hour that we spend together. I get to connect with a friend and have a good conversation. And
Absolutely.
the whole world may show up to listen to it or just a few of our friends in our circles. And whatever, I'm getting to have fun here. Take
Right.
that for the biggest part of what it's worth, and you'll really enjoy the process versus looking at it as this chore that you have to do every week.
It's like, I mean, I get it. And I give grace to people who say, like, I want to get these number of downloads and this, that, and the other. But I think it's just one of those things where if we put all our eggs in that basket, we forget there's other baskets,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
No, you're not wrong. And Bomb Squad, if you're with us tonight live, please, we encourage you to jump in the conversation. If you got questions about your show and how it could be nominated for an award, we're diving into that deep, but we'd love to hear from you. If you're listening to the replay, obviously you missed out on that, but hope you're enjoying what you're hearing so far. So Dominic, let's talk about that path. And again, we are breaking down some walls and making people realize that this is not this grand thing. And maybe this is just in my head, but let's just say that somebody is going that same path you took. They're just getting their podcast started. Maybe an award and saying that they are an award-winning podcaster is what makes them get to that next level. Where do they start? What's the first thing they should be thinking about when they want to go down that road?
I think the first thing you should be doing is think about your show objectively, and also bring in a mentor as well, right? Somebody who can look at your show objectively and say, hey, this is where we can improve. This is where there's some challenges here, right? Like, or this is where you do something really, really well, right? I think that's the first thing, right? And then secondly, is to look at some of the awards that they have out there, like the communicators or the W3s, and look at those categories, right? Look at those categories and see if they make sense. And the thing is, Jason, a lot of times people want to go after brand new, best new podcast or podcast of the year or podcast of the year. Well, I mean, but you're again, it goes back to we're focusing on one egg, but there's other baskets that we're focusing on one basket, but there's other baskets we can be focusing on. There's a best editing over there. There's best sound design. There's best host. There's best duo host. Like there's other stuff, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you have to shift your mindset and say award winning is award winning,
Bingo.
whether it's podcast of the year or just best trailer. It's still an award winning show, no matter what. Or even if you don't win the award, you get nominated. That's something you can leverage as well. I have put that on plenty of decks where it's like nominated for this, that, and the other, and it's helped close a deal on a proposal of some sort, right? Because the thing is, if you're nominated or you're in these spaces, you're clearly competitive. You're clearly putting out some type of quality of work. But I think that first thing is to have that mindset shift and not just focus on the big granddaddy prize of them all, but think about those other categories, but also think about your content objectively. Am I creating content that's different from everybody else, right? Am I just sounding like everybody else, right? Am I doing something different? There's two things I always say that contributes to award-winning shows. Telling the audience something they never heard before, or presenting it in a way that has never been presented before. For example, I grew up here in Memphis, so I've heard the story of Elvis every which way is Sunday, right? Like I know he was born in Tupelo. I know about Graceland. I pass it about at least 20 times a month. I know where Graceland is, right? However, this recent Elvis movie with like Austin Butler as Elvis and stuff like that was presented in a different way. Right.
Yeah.
I had never seen the story of Elvis look like that, sound like that, this, that, and the other. It was an homage to Elvis, but it had like a modern feel to it almost a little bit, right? And with the different nonlinear storytellings and this, that, and the other. And so that's what an example of hearing something that you've heard before, but it's presented in a different way. Yeah. And so those are the type of shows that stand out. And if we're not there as a podcast, that's okay too, right? That's definitely okay. But those are the ones that really stand out. And that's where I think you could probably start from there. It's just thinking objectively and having that mindset.
I think that applies to everything that we're doing in our digital world today, because we see the same thing so often that we are now conditioned to just scroll right past that or hit the skip button and not intake that because we have heard it, seen it ad nauseum. Correct. But if we find a new way to grab somebody's attention and present, even if it could be the oldest story in the world, but if it's presented differently, we're suckers for a good story, especially if we haven't heard it a certain way.
I'll give you. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go right ahead.
No, I'll give you a prime example. So, in addition to Black as America, I've also done work in the behavioral health space, right? And so I was talking to my superiors at the time and saying, hey, I think we can create a show about recovery from addiction and trauma and stuff like that, I think we could do something different, right? And so I'm thinking about how every time I, watch a video about recovery, this and the other, and somebody having a picnic or somebody walking the beach or something, right? And
Right.
there's nothing wrong with that. That's where we want to get them at.
Mhm.
But if I just had a tough night the night before and I'm passed out drunk, right? I can't really
Can't
relate
relate.
to that just yet. Not yet. We want to get them there, but I
Mhm.
can't relate to that just yet, right?
Yeah.
So I presented the idea of telling the story of recovery from 3 different perspectives, from like these multiple point perspectives. So there's the person in recovery who tells their story beautifully, this and the other. But then let's bring in the spouse. Let's bring in the child. Let's bring in the best friend, because they have a story too
Mhm.
that's different from this. It's the same story, but it's a different perspective. And then we bring in the clinician, the behavioral health clinician, and you tell all 3 of these stories at the same time, right? And
Mhm.
so, Jason, that got me a raise. That got me that got me more awards. It got me a lot of recognition in the behavioral health space. And one of the best storytellers in the behavioral health, she was one of our senior fellows. She said, "This young man may have," and I've been doing this for over 40 years. This young man may have changed the way we tell stories of recovery. I have never heard this before,
That's
right?
amazing.
And so it's one of those things where it's like, obviously there's the end goal of like helping people, getting them the treatment and this, that, and the other. But that's one of those ways where even if it's not winning awards, you're helping people and
Mm.
telling the story in a different way that you've heard 1,000 times and present it in a different way can affect change. It just presents you differently in a different light.
That's an incredible story, my friend, and that's where I feel we are. You think about Hollywood as an example to piggyback on that. We say, how many I've said that. How many more times are they going to tell the Godzilla story? And just with better graphics and better CGI and all this,
Right.
all the effects, it's the same story basically. It just keeps getting sharper in regards to how we visualize it. But that's the point, is that it seems like, I know I've had friends that say it seems like they don't have a lot of original ideas anymore. They're doing a lot of remakes and reboots and
Right.
also rans. And I could see how, again, that sucker for that type of story may be into it because it's a little bit different, but the narrative's typically the same. If you can
Right.
break that ground and find a way, and that's why I love watching documentaries, because from the production side of things, I'm always in it for the story, but to watch how each is produced, and I can look at how they set up the interviews and the talking heads, and if it's straight on or if they're doing it from an angle, or how's the background. Like, this is me in Nerd Kingdom looking at all of these different things, but
Right.
to me, that whole presentation, is it coming at me in a different way? Is it going to grab my attention because of that? And then I try to extrapolate that out to what the rest of the audience might be feeling, because if it's a whole new visual feel or a whole new audio feel, that's going to grab somebody's attention, and that can take somebody down that path from, wow, this broke some ground, we need to look at this, to maybe this is changing the game. And that leads to
Absolutely.
all kinds of new opportunities opening up.
Absolutely. And I think, in going back to that first step, another thing that should be considered is, if you feel like you have a good idea, before you move on it, let's go see what's already out there, right? Because like there's probably an angle or a hole that hasn't been presented yet, that hasn't been followed through. That it's like
Mhm.
Deion Sanders when he did punt returns. He always said, "There's always a hole. You just got to find it." Right?
Yeah, right.
There's like right. So
Yeah.
I think the same thing in that regard. Like there's different ways to present it, but it takes like stopping, looking at the landscape, and then moving forward and like trying to see where those holes are.
And I think you have to have the balls to do it.
Oh,
And
1000%.
a lot of people are stuck in the rut of, this is the status quo. This is beyond podcasting, beyond anything. We see certain things and we think we have to emulate that and do it exactly the same. Emulation is fine, but if we're just trying to do a carbon copy,
Right.
what are we producing that's new? I like to look
But
at things and say, how can I put my own unique spin on that? If more think that way, now all of a sudden we've got some really creative shit out there.
right, absolutely. And if you're just doing the carbon copy, why would I listen to you?
Right.
I can just go look at that.
Yeah.
Right.
So
So
I've already seen this movie 5 times. Why do I need to see it a 6?
exactly.
That's great stuff. And again, when we bring this back to the main topic of our conversation from the award side of things. You're like you were saying, when you're watching the Oscars and they come up with these movies, yeah, I may have never heard of them, but obviously they're nominated for a reason.
Right.
Now, there's a couple ways I want to go with this question.
Okay, go for it.
Well, first of all, I think because it stands out, because that creativity is there, because it presented itself in a new way, there's something to say for that. But one thing I learned from you, and I had heard this before, and I guess I don't know why I didn't apply it to the podcast award side of things as well, but you need to make an investment to get to that point of even being recognized. So talk
100%.
about that aspect of it and make it sound less scary, because I think a lot of people are looking at it from like, why would I pay for this? A lot of what we talked about thus far is a big part of it, but obviously there's more. So please indulge us into why we need to invest in that side of things.
Absolutely. And let me first address the part of why should I pay for this, right? So let me be very clear about something. Oscars, Emmys, Tonys, Grammys, whatever major media award thing you can think of, there's some type of fee structure. Now, it's usually the studio and stuff paying for it, and they're amping it up, and they're doing all the for your consideration videos and stuff like that, right? But there's always a fee structure. And as podcasting begins to grow and mature as a medium and as an industry, this is just par for the course. So that's the first part, right? The second part is, and I share with people all the time, think of this as your marketing tool. Think of this as in your marketing budget, right? And I'm going to be transparent, right? A lot of the submission prices, they're pricey. They're very pricey, right? And honestly, they're not geared towards the independent podcaster. They're just not, because if you're bootstrapping this thing, you're wearing the editing hat, the host hat, the producing hat, this, that, and the other, you're stretched pretty thin, and probably the pockets are probably stretched a little bit as well. So it does take an investment in a mindset shift of going after those awards and paying that thing. But also, again, like, you don't have to submit for multiple awards, right? You don't have to submit for like 3 of them or 4 of them. You just need one, right? And this is why also going to those categories and being very specific with the categories matter. But yeah, like, they can be pricey, but it's a mindset shift. And just think of it as a marketing tool and marketing investment, and think about how it sounds to be an award-winning show and how it looks on a proposal, on a resume, this, and the other. Classic, example. Like I said, I worked at a behavioral health company, and I won a Webby for Black is America. And a Webby is one of those top tier 1 awards. And so keep in mind, I own Black is America. The behavioral health company doesn't own it. But when they saw that, it's like, oh, we need to keep him around a little longer. And so there was a raise involved, right? And so it's one of those things where, again, it's an investment that can definitely pay off. Now, obviously, you have to know how to leverage it, where to leverage it, and where that makes sense. But that's just like anything else with marketing. It's no different than, like, if you want to put money in Facebook ads or IG ads or LinkedIn ads or whatever that is. For me, I do it through critical acclaim. I do it from awards. I do it from the level of prestige and not that commercial success. So again, there is a mindset shift and a price when it comes to these things, but just think of it as part of your marketing budget. And so, man, hopefully that'll help.
Now, if you are trying to get nominated in multiple categories, do you pay per category, or are you just paying per award?
You do pay per category. Okay. Yes, you do. And that's why, again, when you're thinking about Wondery and iHeart, this, and the other, $245, $300, that's a drop in the bucket. You're not even going to miss that. That's not even going to show up on the accounting sheet, right? But when you're a bootstrapping podcaster, independent style, that's pretty pricey. Yeah, right? That's pretty pricey. But again, it's definitely something that could pay off. And if you have that mindset shift, make that investment, and able to win or just get nominated, that's something. Just know that's something that can definitely be leveraged for the good.
I have to believe that a lot of it is probably that fear of no return, because even if you do make that investment, there may not be a nomination that comes your way.
That is true.
So you may feel like you're just throwing money away. How can we overcome that barrier in our heads?
I mean, we're spending money on mics and lights and this and the other in the hopes that we get that return via, downloads and subscriptions and views and this and the other. It's all a business venture, and there's no business venture where there's no risk. Like show me a business venture that's like automatic. I'll sign up. Like even ones you think that's automatic, like a vending machine or whatever. All it takes is that walking traffic to stop, and that vending machine is no good. It's just a big brick or whatever, right? So, but it's no different than any other business venture. There's risk involved, right? And so it's one of those things where you have to understand and have that conversation with yourself and your team, for that matter, about your risk tolerance and what that looks like and what you want to do. It's definitely something to not just lightly jump in. And then again, you also have to ask yourself objectively, am I making award-winning content? Is this content you feel like that can be competitive in this space? And one thing I will say that is a pro when it comes to submitting, whether you win or not, right? These things are judged by the who's who of this industry. They're executives at the Wonderies, they're executives at Audible, they're executives at Radiotopia, they're executives of Spotify, they're executives. So to be able to put your show literally in front of a decision maker and one of those things, that's also something to be said about that.
Yeah.
Because there's been plenty of deals been had where maybe they didn't win, but that executive thought, let me reach out to them. Now, I don't know if that's like against the rules or conflict of interest, but I do know that has happened before, where people have judged the show, reached out to them, say, hey, I'm going to keep my eye on you, or let's have a cup of coffee. Mm-hmm. So when you submit for these awards, think about that. You're putting your content and your work in front of these decision makers. And honestly, I would take one of those decision makers as opposed to 50,000 views on YouTube.
Boy, you just freaking nailed it. I was just about to say, you never know who's listening. So if you're wrapped up in saying, man, only 50 some people or 100 people listen to this week's episode, maybe there's somebody in that group that has some stroke in this world. Or who knows where that can go.
Or maybe it's those 20 views are the 20 people that have some stroke in this world. And they're all like starting to fight over your content. Right?
Hell yeah. Yep. No, I get it's all in how you perceive those numbers. And if you get in your own head and you screw yourself up, you're never even going to get to a point where you'd consider yourself for an award or consider putting yourself up for an award, because you're going to be in your own mind burying yourself. Correct. Obviously, I'm not worthy of this. No one's listening. No, it's just getting it in front of the right people. And you never know when that's going to pop off.
And again, like when we're judging these awards, we're not looking at download numbers. We don't ask for download numbers. We don't ask for subscriptions. We don't ask for views. We may ask for your YouTube just to kind of check out the channel, but that's usually, like I said, for tie-breaking purposes. Like I've never submitted or judged an award ceremony where anybody asked for those things. And honestly, and the thing is like, and you're on a level playing field with ESPN, with Limonada, with ABC News. Because one of the things, and I'll land my plane here, one of the things I will take to my grave is that I beat ESPN in a category. Like, you can never take that away from me. Like, you can never take, I always make the joke, I beat a multi-billion-dollar company with a Wendy's 4 for $4 budget. Like, you can't beat that. Like, I can take that to the grave.
That's awesome. I love that line too. That's good. Well, you're talking about some of these big companies, and I know that one of the posts that you made, I think it was LinkedIn or Facebook, that caught my attention was in your judging, you were looking at different reels that people sent in. That's something I want to get to as well. But before we do, let's talk about some of the mistakes. And what jumped out about your post was that it wasn't just us little independent guys. It was these big companies, many of which you've mentioned here in the last few minutes, that are screwing the pooch and most likely costing themselves opportunities to get nominated because they're just not focused on the right thing. So what are some of those mistakes, and what can we do to dodge those landmines?
I think the biggest one, honestly, Jason, is follow instructions. If they say that yours, you have to have 6 episodes in between these 2 dates, and you have 2 episodes outside of those dates, but you want to be considered for new podcast of the year, No, that's a
Right.
disqualification to get that out of here. If I say we want a 5-minute clip or a 5-minute reel, and you send me a 45-minute episode, disqualification. if I say that, like, in your submission reel or whatever clip you send me, it has to say the name of the host or at least one of the hosts, and it's not in there, disqualification.
Yeah.
It's like, it really is. Prime example, and I will not say the name. I'll tell you off camera, but I won't say the name. It's like, listen, I know the voice. I'm looking at the cover art that who it belongs to. Like, I know it's that person, but the rules say it has to be in the clip. I have to give it a 0 for that one, because it's simply says, like, I need to hear the name of the host. That is the rules. And so honestly, man, it's really just following instructions. Second after that is audio quality. And believe it or not, even some of the big boys, screw the pooch on audio quality. I remember a certain company that recently just had a commercial during the halftime show of an NFL game, judging that show. And like, there's like stuff in the background, like sounds and stuff in the background. Multi-billion-dollar company. Right, like, and it's like, I don't know, there was a vacuum cleaner, a ceiling fan, or something, and you can hear it. Right?
Wow.
And you can hear it, and it's like, that's terrible audio quality.
Yeah,
like, so again, and the thing is, it's like, I think independent podcasters actually have a leg up when it comes to awards and stuff like that. Now, granted, I mean, awards are judged by humans, and humans are biased, and this, that, and the other. That happens. We haven't got to the point where AI is judging awards yet.
Good.
Right?
Yeah. Let's bask in the time we have left.
Exactly. But the thing is, it's like, when you're an independent podcaster, you're not beholden to agendas and budgets and this, that, and the other. You can let the creativity flow. Right. And you can do different things. And so a lot of times those big boys have constraints and they can't do certain things. So, there's something to be said about the independence and the freedom of being an independent podcaster when it comes to those awards. But nah, man, those are the big two: not following instructions and audio quality.
I'll tell you, that's very good to hear. And this is something this is what ingrained following instructions into my head and makes me realize, okay, I can do that. I was doing marketing. This is back when I was in the brewery days of my career. I was working with one of the breweries on a marketing campaign, and we had done some radio commercials, and they asked me to edit. This is when I was just getting into things like with podcasting and audio design and things like that. They wanted a 30-second commercial for the radio and asked me to assemble it. And I did. And it was 29 seconds. And in my head, I thought I was doing it right because I was under, and they said, like, no, it needs to be 30. I said, really? Like, that extra second? Like, yeah, we asked for 30. The radio, when I sent it in, I thought I was done. They're like, no, it's got to be. So all I needed to do is just add on a little thing at the end to push it to 30. And it was, an easy fix, but okay, if they ask me for 30, I have to give them 30. There's no 28. There's no 31. Hit it on the button.
If I invite you to my house, and I say, Jason, when you come to my house, you got to take your shoes off at the door. Mm-hmm. You're not going to come in with your shoes on, are you? Right. Like, no, if you're submitting for these people's awards, you have to follow the rules. Like, those are their rules. Yeah. So, but no, man, that, like, people get dinged for not following instructions all the time. Like, they say, hey, we need the links that you share to come from a place where it's free to listen. Apple Podcasts, whatever, right?
Right.
So you can't send the Patreon link as the link for us to check out.
And I'm assuming that's happened.
Correct. It really is the simple things. Occam's razor. It usually is. It's the simple things, right?
Yeah. Amazing. We're all adults here. We still can't follow instructions.
It happens.
Well,
and then they'll be upset, like, oh, I had never liked those awards. They're biased and this and the other. Like, well, okay.
You'd think, at least this is my take on it, and it goes back to what you said before, Dominic, about bootstrapping, and if I'm going to pony up a few $100 to get nominated, I damn well am going to make sure that I'm at least doing what it takes to get to that point.
Correct.
Not trying to wild west this thing. I want to make sure I'm getting this in front of the right people in the right way.
Absolutely. And the inverse of that, the big boys like, oh, we're these people. They won't cut off, they won't take off for that. Mm-hmm. Not true.
Well, I respect the backbone that you guys are putting up and saying, no, you just because you're this person. It's just funny. It just reminds me of a story that I was told about here in Pittsburgh, a certain quarterback that used to be here on our football team that will remain nameless, who went into a bar and said that he doesn't pay for drinks in Pittsburgh. And the bartender said, well, you do in my bar. I was told that third hand. So I don't know if that was true or not, but
I got you.
Anyway, no, but it's the same mentality. Why do you feel that the rules shouldn't apply to you?
Right. And the thing is, it's like, again, podcasting is still new, right? It's still a growing medium. It's still maturing, right? Mm-hmm. And so podcast awards are still fairly new, all the same. And so as a judge or as a person who just loves podcasts in this industry, I have to uphold the integrity, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. I have to uphold the integrity. So I can't let, maybe Spotify get away with it. Right, but just because they're Spotify, that's not how this works.
Right,
and even should Spotify want that?
No, and I think these companies, anybody, you could be a one-person show, you could be the biggest company in the world. You should be aspiring to live up to those standards because they're in place for a reason.
Correct.
And it shows a lot about what you feel about the rules and about the boundaries. If you're not willing to conform and say, okay, if this is what they're asking me for, obviously there's a reason for it. I'm going to make sure that's what I deliver. So, yeah, if you're not getting nominated because of that, that's on you. 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it's one thing to just get beat out, right? Like that happens.
Right.
Like I would rather just have that, but just like to not get to the nomination process or to win because I didn't follow instructions. That's rough.
Yeah.
That's rough. But it happens. It happens all the time.
No, that hurt. I mean, I can equate that to something where it's a completely different scenario, but at the same time, I understood the decision. I had submitted my information for a contract opportunity and misspelled the name of the company. And when they got back to me and said they were moving in a different direction, I asked why, because I felt like I had all the qualifications. And they said, well, for a job that it needs this much detail, you misspelled our company name. And that stood out. I went, holy shit. Okay. I don't blame you at all. I will own that and make sure next time I quadruple check to make sure.
I've definitely done that a time or two.
Sure.
Yeah.
We all make that mistake. And that's the thing. I didn't dwell on it. I just owned it. I knew that I screwed up, and that's a pretty big glaring mistake. And if it's something that could be fixed and you miss it, you have to own that. But I think in regards to our conversation, if you're not taking those steps, that tells me that you're just thinking you deserve it. Like you're entitled.
It's entitled. There it is.
You are that word. Ooh, right.
That's the word.
Well, let's skip ahead one step. Let's say we've done our due diligence. We did our homework. We submitted the right content. We got nominated. What's next?
So it depends, right? So there's different scenarios here, and it depends on the awards and this and the other. For some, there's like a voting scenario, where like a people's choice kind of situation, right? Where, you have to hey, vote for me for this thing. The Webbies does that. The Signals do that, this and the other. But there are some where it's like you just get nominated and it's just purely just judging, right? And it goes to the different levels of judges as any other. And then you have to just wait. And that's probably the hardest part for me. It's the waiting game. Like, did I win? Did I lose? I just want to know. This and the other, and to build up the anticipation, this and the other. So it depends on the different award, scenarios. Like some, there's a voting aspect. Some is like you nominated this and the other. And then you just kind of go from there. So it's all pretty much downhill from there.
Yeah, sounds like
and what I mean by that is
in a good way.
In a good way, right? Because you've done all the work,
right?
And like I said, at this point, we're just waiting to see who wins, who gets nominated, stuff like that.
Yeah. Does it pay? I mean, and this could be a loaded question, but you're nominated, you're up for this award. Does it pay to do some type of paid advertising campaign on Facebook? I mean, maybe it would apply more if it's one of those ones where you need to acquire votes. or accumulate
Yeah,
both.
it is right, and those are always hit and miss. I've heard some people where they do Facebook ads and IG ads, and it works for them, and some
Mhm.
people say, "No, I don't do that. Like
Yeah.
I don't do that." And so it's kind of a mixed bag when it comes to the ads and promoting and this that, and the other. But
Yeah.
like again, like success leaves clues. It's always dropping clues. So it's like again, this is where I would go to how studios and studios execs have those ads for like those for your consideration for like best actor for Oscars and Emmys and stuff like that. They have those
Mhm.
videos on social media all the time. What are they doing? What are they creating sizzle reels, some type of special content? This
Right.
and that's something that I would do to try to promote like, hey, vote for me, vote for me. And sometimes I'll even play the David and Goliath card, like, hey, look, ESPN is trying to beat little old me. Vote for me so we can teach them a lesson and this and the other, right? Or something like that.
Yeah.
Get creative with it for sure.
Well, and that's yeah, have fun with it. I think this is it,
Of
it's sort of
course.
it speaks to the whole genre of podcasting. This whole thing is supposed to be fun, whether you're doing
It
it
is
for
supposed to be fun.
hobby or for a career or for your business. Have fun with it, and
But
especially something like that.
absolutely. And also just remember that if you're nominated, in a way, you've already kind of won, right?
Absolutely.
Right. Because
Yeah.
again, like think about like, you see a big time movie release in the summers, like, Oscar nominated Anthony
Mhm.
Hopkins or something like that,
Right.
right? Like they're doing that on purpose because now your name and your
Mhm.
craft has a level of prestige, if you will, right? So yeah, leverage that, honor that, show it to the world, put it on a promo kit or a resume or whatever. Like
Oh,
there's
hell
something to be
yeah.
said about that. Yeah, absolutely.
I'd have the award
Leverage
on
it.
my podcast cover. If it gets to that point, I'll put a little award-winning show. I mean, that to me, if I'm trying to appeal to a new listener and they find the cover art in a random search and it's in their genre and it says it won an award or two, I think that sticks out.
It does. It
Yeah.
does. Like
Yeah.
people love to gravitate to winners, right?
Mhm.
Like they just do, right? So you say award winning and this and the other. I'm gonna give it a second look. I
Sure.
may not listen, I may not subscribe, but I'm gonna give it a second look, and that may be all it takes.
Yeah. And even then you may get into it and discover that it's not for you, but you
That's
may
true.
discover that it is for you. And all of a sudden now
That,
you've got not something new in your rotation that's impacting your life. That's big.
absolutely, absolutely.
Well, I want to go back to something you mentioned before, and this is, I guess, in tune with how you would want to get started. If I'm asking this slightly selfishly because this is new to me. I want to get started in the award circuit. I want to get my name out there. I want to look at some categories where I feel like I'd be a good fit. Right
Hmm.
out of the gates, trying to go for best podcast of the year seems like I just got into podcasting. Let me call up Joe Rogan and see if he'll bring me on his show. It seems like a
Right.
leap. Like maybe there should be more things that we're looking at first. Is that how you see it? Or is this another thing
Well,
that I might be looking at slightly jaded?
well, it's one of those things where it's like podcaster of the year is going to be a crowded field,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like everybody's going to go after podcast of the year, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's why we try to like be a little bit more surgical and thinking about other aspects. Now, if you think you're a podcast of the year, go for it. I'm not going to sit up here and tell you that, but we just want to get on the board,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then also maybe we want to think about tier 3 awards as opposed to tier 1 awards, right? So tier 3 are like W3 communicator, where it's competitive, but it's not as competitive as say the Webbies or the Ambies, which are considered the top tier of our industry, right? So yeah, let's work the lower tier circuit, if you will, and just to get on the board, because again,
Yeah.
award winning, award nominated is still the thing. So if I'm starting out, that's what I would do, because that's what I did. That's what this is. No, right, no, that right there. See that's
Mm-hmm.
that's a W3, and then on the other side we got a communicator, right?
Awesome.
That's where I started with those, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I worked up to like the signals and the ambies and the webbies and stuff like that. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Or were you looking for okay?
No, and that's the thing. The whole point is that we often have that mindset because you ask somebody, well, if I'm going to do a podcast, I want to get downloads like Joe Rogan does. I want to be as big as Joe. I want to be the biggest in the world. Like, okay, I don't think it hurts to aspire to get to the top of your game, but
Not at all.
wanting to get there on day one is probably too far of a stretch why not enjoy the journey and learn a lot of valuable skills along the way? And that's going to get you there at a more rapid pace because you're learning and getting better. Try to start at the very top and come down. That's not how a lot of people do it. You don't have helicopters take you to the top of Mount Everest so you can climb down it. That's not the accomplishment.
And even if you did have a helicopter taking you to the Mount Everest, you wouldn't know how to get down.
Right, exactly.
You would literally be stuck there.
Yeah,
you don't know. You didn't go up there that way, so you would literally get stuck there and wouldn't know how to get down. Or at the very least, let's say I put you 10 years to the future and put you in Joe Rogan's spot, you would lose it because you don't know how you got there. Like you just know you're there, so you're probably going to squander it.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's something about getting those reps in and doing that work, which I know is cliche as the day is long. I get it, but cliches are cliches because they're true.
Exactly.
Right?
We say them often for a reason.
There's a reason we say cliches like that, but
exactly.
It's important to do those reps and the funniest thing, I'll say this really quickly. I remember I used to get made fun of for editing, and I don't bemoan anybody for editing, not editing this, that, and the other. But people, they don't make fun of it now. They see the awards stack up. They don't make fun of it now. Like, oh, okay, because editing, you can do a lot of cool stuff. So
yeah, well, you mean like making it a more quality product? People were making fun of you for that?
There's this thing where like people are saying like, oh, well, it's not authentic. It's not an authentic conversation. This and the other. No. You know, it's that thing, right? And it's like to each his own. Like you do podcasting your way. I do podcasting my way. And hey, we'll like you said earlier, it's supposed to be fun. Like, right. Why are we hard?
I know.
Stuff, right?
Well, I have to ask Dominic, are they talking about removing and filler words? Because I've had that argument with people too, where they say it takes away the genuineness of the conversation. Like, no, it just tells me you're lazy. If you're not willing to go through your episode and take out the low-hanging fruit to give your listener a better experience, you're lazy.
Well, it's interesting because I think when they hear editing, that's what they're thinking. But when they listen to a show like mine, that's like a nonfiction narrative style, they don't understand that like I'm moving. Let's say this audio that we're doing right now at minute 52, I'm moving that audio to minute 36.
Okay.
In the finished product, right? Like that's the editing I'm doing. So they just assume that like I'm just like editing ahs and ums and this and the other. No, I'm like Minority Report, moving stuff around on the DAW. Right, that's the editing I'm doing. So,
okay,
but, it's to each his own. Like again, podcast is supposed to be fun, right? Like, why are we doing that?
Well, and you speak very much to the standing out aspect and being different, and that editing could be that very thing because most people won't go to that extent.
It is very much that thing. Like the editing is the game changer. For me, for sure, 1000%.
No question about it. Well, we're getting close to the end of our hour here, Dominic. So I want to say, first of all, this has been tremendous information. And I know when I go down this path, this is something I've already set myself up for to want to pursue in 2025. So you and me will be talking a little bit more because I'm going to the master. You got the awards behind it to back this up. I want you to evaluate what I'm doing and tell me where I've got some strengths that I can make this happen. But
For sure.
Overall, I think the biggest thing, at least, I'm thinking of it from a brand perspective, from a business perspective, of the people that I work with that are building this for their business, the award part of it, does that impact what they're doing to a point where it could lead to more sales? Because that's what I'm encouraging people to use podcasting for. You want the phone to ring, and the podcast can help introduce your business to the most targeted people that you could serve. How's that award play into people that are podcasting for that dynamic?
Listen, there is a reason why you hear JD Power and Associates, this, that, and the other about this car or whatever. Like there's a certain level of prestige or that gold seal or that gold stamp, that you get to your podcast, right? And you're leveraging this with contracts and proposals and even downloads, if you will. But so like there's definitely tons of ways to leverage it, and I encourage people to do that.
Right on. Well, Dominic, we'll wrap up with this. I think this is going to be a pretty loaded question for you because you've done it in a number of different ways. But since getting into the podcasting space, what has stood out as the most powerful, life-changing accomplishment? We know the awards have played a major role, but what's something that really sticks out for you as to why you want to continue being a part of this medium and a part of this industry?
Taking my family to Disney World on somebody else's dime.
Ooh, it's good.
Because I was doing podcasting for, like I said, a behavioral health company, and they said, hey, we want you to go down to Florida and cover this thing and this, that, and the other. Bring the family. You don't have to pay anything. We'll take care of it. And I'm just walking around Animal Kingdom like, podcasting has me here. Oh, and by the way, the company rented out Animal Kingdom for 3 hours just for us.
Oh, no
So
kidding.
there's no line, no wait. There's food. Like, you just go up to the food cart and it's like hand you a funnel cake or whatever.
Beautiful.
This, and the other. And I'm just like, all this from podcasting.
Right.
Like all I did was like this, scrawny black kid back in 2016. He's like, you know what? We're just gonna try this thing to see kind of where it heads. But when I was able to take my family to Walt Disney World on somebody else's dime and got paid for it, like, that's the epitome of, like, that's the best. Like, that's the absolute best. To see my daughter, watch the parade every day and literally eat ice cream every single day down at Walt Disney World, that's the best thing ever. That's probably the best accomplishment when it comes to the podcasting for me.
Lifelong memories that come from that, those can't be replaced.
Nope.
Great stuff.
Not at all.
Well, you're doing great work, and I commend you for everything you've done. And again, I think the strategy that you've shared tonight, if we could put a overarching theme on this whole conversation, if you're thinking about getting your podcast out there for awards, 1, do it and don't hold back, and 2, follow the freaking instructions.
Follow the freaking instructions.
Great stuff, my friend. Well, Dominic, if our listeners and viewers in the Bomb Squad want to connect with you for even more value, how do they make that happen?
Sure thing. You follow me on Instagram, The Real Dominic Lawson, on IG, and then also on LinkedIn, just first and last name. That's pretty much where you can find me.
Well, I'm going to make life easy, as I always do for our members of the Bomb Squad. That information will be in the show notes. Find Dominic. I highly recommend that you connect with him. Ironically enough, we connected on LinkedIn about an hour ago, or an hour before we went live. So now we're connected there as well. But nevertheless, my friend, this has been an absolute blast. I want to thank you for bringing the goods. This was a great conversation, and again, taught me a lot, and I think our listeners and viewers are going to get something from this as well.
I hope so. Definitely try to think about awards and that critical acclaim. It can definitely provide your podcast some success.
When we connect again here on the show, it's going to be when I'm saying the award-winning Let's Blow This Up, thanks to your tutelage.
There it is. There it is.
So Bomb Squad, get ready for that. And of course, get ready for next week. We'll be back with another installment of Let's Blow This Up Live. We are here on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook every Wednesday at 7:00 p.m. for the rest of October, but we'll be winding down season 2 of the show in early November. More details on that coming up soon, but we've still got a few more weeks of great conversations here on the show. Make sure you are subscribed, you are following, you click the bell on YouTube so you get notified. Don't be a dick about this. It's good to be here. On behalf of Dominic Lawson, my name is Jason Sircone. This has been Let's Blow This Up, and until our paths cross again, stay explosive. See you next week.